Revealed my military nightmares to my new girlfriend, only to watch her retreat into silence and fear of our future. I am a 38-year-old man, freshly back in the dating pool after being single for almost 6 years. My last relationship was rough, one of those soul-draining situations where you start to realize you're valued only for your steady paycheck and what you provide, not who you truly are. I'm not a cynic when it comes to women or dating, never have been, but I've always had pretty poor judgment about people's intentions. That blind spot has led me into one mess after another, always ending with me feeling utterly dispensable, appreciated only for my dependability and material support. To be fair, I don't think that's unusual or even tragic, it just is. But those years drained me, so I took a long break to recalibrate my life. A part of my story that many people only know the surface of: I'm a veteran. My service started after 9/11, and, like most people around me, the details of my experiences are never really discussed beyond that label of combat veteran. Living in a big city, it feels like there's this detachment, a lack of genuine respect or empathy for military service, but it doesn't really bother me. I've moved on from that chapter, proud but content to leave it in the past. Still, some things stick with you. I wrestle with PTSD, it could be so much worse, and I count myself lucky most nights, but the symptoms rise up now and then. Tension creeps in at night, and there are stretches when the dreams are especially vivid. It isn't an every night torment. Usually, it will flare for a week, maybe 2 if it's bad, then recede. On the rare occasion, I wake up in a shock, confused and emotionally charged. After the military, I went into contracting overseas as a civilian, got technical training, learned about money from good mentors, and built up a comfortable life. Physically, I keep active despite injuries, and I have a career here at home now, a generous salary, solid benefits. In the grand scheme, I'm doing very well, a fact I never take for granted. A few years back, I met a woman, she's 31, at a time I wasn't looking for love. There was real chemistry, but she was seeing someone and I wasn't open to anything anyway. We never spoke about the connection, never crossed any lines, and let the spark quietly extinguish before it even started. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if the whole thing was in my head, but I let it be. Then, out of nowhere, a few months ago, she reached out to me. The old boyfriend was ancient history. We met again, and the connection was instant, electric, real. This is the first relationship I've allowed myself to have in many years, and as things progressed and she started staying over, the familiar anxiety crept in. I was terrified of having a bad night while she was there, didn't want my PTSD to ambush her or see me at my lowest. I've always felt awkward talking about it, ashamed, even. There are men who have suffered so much more. Who am I to complain? I realized I had to warn her, though, even if I didn't want to make it a thing. I told her sometimes I might wake up suddenly, maybe bolt upright or call out, get the shakes or be disoriented. Nothing violent, never diving for cover or grabbing for weapons, just these intense starts. To her immense credit, she was understanding, an angel about it, really. She gently asked to talk more about it, to let her in on what it feels like, what I carry with me from those years. In the past, I'd always put up walls. Sure, I've been called emotionally unavailable by partners. They've said being a stranger to parts of me is what ruined things. As much as I hated hearing it, I know they weren't wrong. But even now, I couldn't fully open up to her. She pressed gently at first and then left it alone, supportive, never pushy. She said nothing I could tell her would change how she saw us. She has so much empathy, and when she reassured me like that, I felt safer than I'd felt in years. She told me she loved me, and she made sure I felt seen. When we walk, she wraps her arm around mine, compliments my looks and my style, posts pictures of us, introduces me to everyone important in her life. For the first time in so long, I felt like I belonged somewhere. 3 nights ago, I had a pretty bad episode. Not the worst, no shouting, just a sudden jolt upright in bed, startling her awake. Apparently, I sat there, stone silent and tense, while she softly called my name. I only remember hearing her once, telling her I was fine, but she says she asked several times. I settled quickly, but the next day, she gently pressed again. Could I share, just a little, about what goes through my head during these nightmares or what memories haunt me? I looked at her, this beautiful, bright spark in my life, and, for the first time in years, I didn't want to shut her out. I didn't want to let fear ruin what we had. I shared one account that still gets to me sometimes. She listened, asked gently detailed questions, and I answered, at first. But in the dark of the room, I could see her expression changing. Concern was etched on her face. Not fear, but a gnawing uncertainty. Then she asked, did you enjoy being there, though? I think almost every combat veteran would say that, on some level, yes, there are moments, even terrible ones, when something inside you comes alive. That truth is complicated. She knew the answer before she asked, hoping I'd deny it, but I couldn't lie. I didn't answer directly. I tried to walk that impossible tightrope. And now, I'm left in this limbo, wondering what comes next, torn between wanting her to know me and being terrified she will. I wish I'd just left it alone. The moment I opened my mouth, I set off something I couldn't pull back. That was 3 days ago, and now she's been distant, barely replying to my texts. We haven't seen each other since. I keep racking my brain, wondering what, if anything, I can do now. But honestly, it feels like there's nothing left. Dating hasn't been easy for me. Each time I think I might have finally found someone special, it seems to slip right through my fingers. When I met this girl, I really felt like we'd found something real. Something worth fighting for. But after I opened up, tried to be vulnerable for once, I watched everything change between us. I'd been hopeful, now I just feel discouraged, crushed by the weight of yet another disappointment. As a veteran, everyone always encourages me to talk about my experiences. If you scroll through TikTok or Instagram, you'll see endless posts from well-meaning people telling you to share your story, to speak out. Friends and family encourage me to confide in them or, at the very least, remind me that I can if ever I feel the need. But the truth is, if you've served, you know you really can't. Or at the very least, you won't ever truly know whether you can until you take that risk, and then you have to live with whatever happens next. I took that chance. I was falling for this girl, so I took the leap and let her see all of me, both the good and the broken. She saw it, and then she walked away. Part of me knows that's her right. There's a certain integrity in giving someone the freedom to see everything you are, to let them choose if they want to take that on. But part of me can't escape the feeling that maybe I'll never find a true partner. Maybe there's a part of me I'll always have to hide, because it's too much for anyone to handle. The loneliness is overwhelming tonight. I wish I'd never responded to her in the first place. I wish I'd known better than to even try dating again. Now I'm left staring at my phone, wishing for something that will likely never come, trying to make sense of this sadness that just won't let go. Update 1. During my time in the service, I want to be absolutely clear, I never witnessed or committed any war crimes. There have always been a lot of opinions, sometimes critical or skeptical, when it comes to the military, and I get that. People are entitled to feel how they feel about it. All I can do is share my own experience. From what I saw, the men and women beside me, wearing the same uniform, were truly good people. They came from all kinds of backgrounds, carrying all sorts of stories and motivations, but what united them was a genuine desire to do the right thing over there, whatever the circumstances. Sure, not everyone was the perfect soldier, some struggled with various things, but never did I meet anyone who I'd say was evil, or out to do harm for harm's sake. I just felt it was important to say this as clearly as I can. During my career in uniform, I was constantly surrounded by people who were simply trying to be decent human beings, even when the situations we faced were anything but simple. Update 2. The last 3 days have been some of the most stressful and anxiety-ridden days I've experienced in a long time. I found myself desperate for an outlet, teetering on the edge of two actions I wanted to avoid. On one hand, I was tempted to confide in my friends, but I worried that I might end up unintentionally influencing the way they saw my new girlfriend. On the other hand, I felt the strain of wanting to lay my troubles at her feet, but she clearly needed some space, and I didn't want to overwhelm her further, especially when she seemed already weighed down. With all this swirling in my head, I just needed to get it out somewhere, to vent, to lay the chaos bare and free myself from carrying it alone. I never could have imagined that by sharing my story, I'd be met with such overwhelming support from so many kind strangers. Their encouragement lifted me in a way I hadn't expected, and it turned out that my experience even resonated with others going through similar things. Feeling this connection with people I've never met, I realized that, no matter how this situation plays out, even if I look back and see where I could have handled things differently or better, I was, at the very least, making a genuine effort to do the right thing. That knowledge, and the support I received, gave me something I truly needed, reassurance that I was trying my best when things felt impossibly heavy. Update 3. There were stretches of my life where I leaned heavily on therapy, working intensely with my therapist on so many things, processing, recalibrating, just trying to make sense of what I'd experienced. As I found my footing in the civilian world, I didn't need that support quite as often, but now, in the middle of this brand new relationship, I can feel myself wavering. I'm realizing how valuable it would be to reach out, to have someone professional in my corner while I navigate these unfamiliar waters, or to help me get my bearings if tonight goes south. What I shared with her wasn't about my direct combat actions. Instead, I told her about the aftermath, the scene when my unit arrived after a night exploded in a civilian area. I avoided being graphic. No shots were exchanged that day. Really, it was about us doing what we could to secure the space for the civilians while our combat medic did their best to help the wounded. She never pushed me for details about combat or pursued talk about the kinds of action I'd been in when I was deployed. Her curiosity felt respectful, genuine, and filled with empathy. She just wanted to understand what burdens I carried. It didn't feel like she was entitled to anything I wasn't ready to give. I know people worry about boundaries with stuff like this, but with her, it truly just felt like partnership. But now, I'm anxious. The kind of anxious that rides under your skin and makes the world feel tilted. In just a little while, I'm going to see her. We've got a few things planned for tonight, but the tone has already shifted. I feel the chill through her texts, shorter replies, less warmth, almost no excitement. It's hard not to brace myself, to prepare for the possibility that this night ends with news I don't want to hear. Still, I keep telling myself that no matter what, I'll try to handle it with grace. The truth is, I really like her. I've fallen for her. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but it found me, and before I knew it, I'd started picturing us together, letting myself get comfortable with that idea, building quiet hopes for the future. Now, I'm just here, sitting with that uncertainty, not knowing, holding my breath, hoping for one answer, but bracing myself for another. Update 4. We had our conversation on a beautiful fall day, which gave us the perfect excuse to spend time outside and walk together. I felt incredibly nervous, but I knew I needed to rip the band-aid off. The more hesitant I was, the more the awkwardness seemed to build. I realized I'd rather just face it head on than let that tension simmer. I started by apologizing for the other night, especially for not asking her how she felt after I had shared something important with her. I admitted that I didn't want to overwhelm her, that I wasn't sure how much to say or how to frame my feelings without it being too much this early on. Talking about myself is uncomfortable for me. I'm not used to opening up, and because I have so little practice, I always worry about what's right or palatable to say. Still, I told her my only intent was to let her in so she could really know me. Because I see her having a place beside me in my life, and the last thing I wanted was for her to feel like I was hiding anything. I told her I would completely understand if it was all too much, either because it's too early or what I shared was heavy. Then I asked her if she was okay, if any of what I'd shared had weighed on her since our talk. She apologized, so sincerely I could hear she was a bit flustered. She explained she hadn't meant to withdraw at all. She had felt me pull back and, in her confusion, just wanted to give me space. While I was opening up to her, she'd noticed I was leaving things unsaid and struggling to make my story both honest and easier to digest. She said she could tell I was overextending myself, and after our talk, she really didn't want to press me or scare me off. Listening to her try to explain all this felt surreal. My last attempt at dating, years ago, was with someone who never took accountability or showed me real consideration when we weren't on the same page. Standing there, I felt almost shell-shocked to be met with that level of unnecessary contrition and warmth. She kept squeezing my hand, comforting me in this quietly affectionate way. At one point, we even stopped walking and she looked up at me. She's not tall, but I'm over 6 feet, and for a second the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of us. I don't know if I can even explain it. I think I'm falling in love with this girl. Truly, deeply falling for her in a way that's new to me. Some of my friends pointed out that I've probably been acting differently towards her, and they were right. When I feel overexposed or emotionally vulnerable, my default has always been to pull back and withdraw. I went straight into wait-and-see mode, a sharp change since I'm usually the assertive pursuer. That change in energy really threw her. I made an appointment to see my therapist, who I haven't talked to in a while. It's obvious I could use some support and new skills when it comes to communicating and dealing with vulnerability in a relationship. I'm not just out of practice, I've never really been good at managing my own struggles while trying to be someone's partner. Our conversation lasted much longer than it seems here. At one point, she told me she admires the fact that I served, and is genuinely grateful that I care enough about her to push past my comfort zone and share some of what I've seen. She said a lot of kind things about strength, both physical and emotional. Some of her jokes about my physical strength made me laugh, but I'll keep those between us. By the end of the evening, I felt we'd taken a real step forward together. What I feared could be a speed bump turned out not to be one at all. I'm grateful to anyone who reminded me to breathe, to relax, and just talk honestly. I'm stunned by how generous people can be with their time and experiences. Truly, the conversation I had with her was more thoughtful and productive than it would have been without hearing those reminders. We're never too old to learn from one another, and I'm glad I took that lesson to heart. Update 5. It's been 2 weeks since our walk, and things have been incredible between us. Better than incredible, actually. I've never felt this connected to someone. We've been spending most nights together, and she started leaving little things at my place. Her coffee mug in my kitchen sink, her book on my nightstand, that floral perfume lingering on my pillowcase. Small signs that she's making herself at home, that this is becoming real. Last Friday, she surprised me by cooking dinner at my place while I was at work, said she wanted to do something special for me. When I walked in, the whole apartment smelled like garlic and herbs, candles were lit, and she was wearing this dress I'd never seen before. We had an amazing evening, talked until nearly midnight, and I remember thinking this might be the woman I marry. That's what makes what happened yesterday so jarring. I had a therapy appointment in the afternoon, the first one since I started seeing my therapist again. We talked about vulnerability, about how things were going with her, and honestly, it felt good to process everything with a professional. My therapist even mentioned how much more relaxed I seemed compared to our previous sessions years ago. When I got home around 6 p.m., I expected to find her there. She'd texted earlier saying she was going to stop by after work to grab something she'd forgotten. But the apartment was empty. I figured she'd already come and gone, so I texted asking how her day went. No response. That's when I noticed something odd. My laptop was open on the kitchen counter, which was strange because I always close it and put it away. The screen was black, but when I touched the trackpad, it came to life showing my email inbox. I never leave my email open, force of habit from my contracting days when operational security was drilled into us. I scrolled through the recent activity, and my stomach dropped. Someone had opened several emails from the VA, including one about my disability rating that I'd received last month but hadn't fully read yet. There were also emails from my therapist's office confirming appointments, and one from a veteran support group I'd looked into joining but never actually contacted. My hands were shaking as I realized what had happened. She'd been snooping through my personal correspondence while I was at therapy. I called her immediately. No answer. Tried again an hour later, straight to voicemail. I was pacing my apartment, trying to process this violation of privacy, when she finally texted back around 10 p.m. Need some time to think. Can we talk tomorrow? I barely slept. Part of me wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but deep down, I knew she'd gone looking for information I hadn't shared, crossed a line I didn't even know I needed to draw. When we met for coffee this morning, she looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, that same distant energy from 3 weeks ago. She apologized immediately, said she hadn't planned on looking but got curious when she saw the laptop open. Said she was trying to understand me better, to know what I was dealing with so she could be more supportive. I saw the emails about your rating, she said quietly. I had no idea it was that severe. And the therapy appointments. You've been going for years, haven't you? Not just since we started dating. I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with choice. This wasn't me deciding to let her in, this was her taking what I wasn't ready to give. I told her how violated I felt, how trust has always been fragile for me, especially after my last relationship. She started crying then, saying she knew she'd messed up, that she was scared I was keeping things from her that might affect us both. She mentioned reading about PTSD online after our conversation, how some articles talked about veterans who'd hidden the extent of their struggles from partners for years. I don't know how to love someone who won't let me see the whole picture, she said through tears. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't get past the betrayal. We've been building something beautiful, and now there's this crack running right through the foundation. I don't know if we can repair it, or if I even want to try. I'm back home now, staring at that laptop, wondering if I should have seen this coming. Wondering if my instincts about people are still as broken as they were 6 years ago. The worst part is, I can't tell if I'm angrier about what she did, or about the fact that part of me understands why she did it. I think I need to call my therapist again. Update 6. I called my therapist that same afternoon. Got an emergency session scheduled for the next day. Spent the whole night replaying our coffee conversation, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. Betrayed, yes. But also something else I couldn't quite name. The therapy session helped me realize I was angrier at myself than at her. I'd been so focused on protecting my privacy that I'd never actually communicated my boundaries. How was she supposed to know that my laptop was off limits if I'd never said so? My therapist pointed out that she was probably feeling just as lost as I was. Dating someone with PTSD when you have no frame of reference must be terrifying. I decided to text her. Nothing heavy, just asking if we could meet again to talk things through properly. She responded within minutes, which surprised me. We agreed to meet at her place Friday night. When I got there, I could tell she'd been preparing for this conversation. She had notes written on a piece of paper beside her on the couch, actual notes, like she was studying for an exam. It would have been endearing if the situation weren't so tense. She started before I could even sit down. I know what I did was wrong. I violated your privacy, and I'm sorry. But I need you to understand something. I've never dated someone with PTSD before. I don't know what's normal, what's dangerous, what I should be worried about. Her voice was shaking slightly. After our talk, I kept reading things online about veterans who'd hidden substance abuse, or violent episodes, or thoughts of suicide from their partners. I got scared. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because she was wrong to be concerned, but because she was right to be. I'd been so focused on my shame about the nightmares that I'd never considered how my secrecy might look to someone on the outside. I sat down across from her and took a deep breath. What did you read in those emails? She looked at her notes. You're rated at 70% disability for PTSD. You've been in therapy on and off for 8 years. There were emails about medication adjustments from 2 years ago. She paused. And there was one from last month about a crisis hotline check-in that I didn't understand. My heart stopped. I'd completely forgotten about that email. The VA does routine wellness calls for veterans with higher disability ratings, just checking in. It's standard procedure, nothing dramatic, but I could see how that would look to someone who didn't know the context. That's not what you think it is, I said quickly. It's just a routine call they make. I've never been suicidal or anything like that. But even as I said it, I could see her processing, connecting dots that weren't actually connected. The distant look in her eyes was back. What else aren't you telling me? She asked quietly. And that's when something inside me snapped. Not anger, but clarity. You want to know everything? Fine. Let's skip the careful revelations and just get it all out there. I told her about the drinking I'd done in my 20s to quiet the dreams. About the job I'd lost because I couldn't handle crowded places for a while. About the panic attack I'd had in a movie theater 3 years ago that left me feeling like a complete failure as a man. About the medication I'd tried that made me feel like a zombie, and how I'd stopped taking it against my doctor's advice. She listened without interrupting, but I could see her withdrawing with each revelation. By the time I finished, she was sitting with her arms wrapped around herself, looking small and overwhelmed. I can't do this, she whispered. The words hung in the air between us. I'd prepared myself for this possibility, but hearing it still felt like stepping on a landmine. I care about you so much, she continued, tears starting to fall. But I don't think I'm strong enough to be with someone who's carrying all of this. I keep worrying about saying the wrong thing, or missing signs that something's wrong, or not knowing how to help when you need it. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, and that's not fair to either of us. I wanted to argue, to tell her that most days I'm completely fine, that she'd never have to carry my burdens. But I could see it in her face, she'd already made up her mind. We sat there in silence for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, I stood up. I understand, I said, and I meant it. I don't like it, but I understand. She walked me to the door, and for a moment, I thought she might change her mind. She looked up at me with those eyes that had made me feel safe just 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, she said. I really am. Me too. I drove home in a strange kind of numbness. Not the crushing disappointment I'd expected, but something more like resignation. Maybe this is just how it goes for people like me. Maybe the price of serving is that some doors stay closed forever. But here's the thing that's been eating at me since that night. I found myself almost relieved. Not because I wanted it to end, but because the pretending was finally over. For weeks, I'd been performing a version of myself that was easier to love, the successful contractor, the guy who had his life together, the partner who could be counted on without being a burden. Now I'm wondering if I've been approaching this all wrong. Maybe the right person wouldn't need me to hide pieces of myself. Maybe they'd want to know about the 3 a.m. anxiety, the way crowds still make my shoulders tense, the fact that some days the weight of things I've seen sits heavier than others. Maybe I've been looking for someone to rescue me from my own story, when what I really need is someone who wants to write the next chapter with me, exactly as I am. The loneliness is different this time. Less desperate, more patient. Like I'm finally learning the difference between being alone and being lonely, and accepting that sometimes the former is necessary to avoid the latter. I've got another therapy session scheduled for Tuesday. This time, we're going to talk about what I actually want from a relationship, not just what I think I should want. The apartment feels quiet without her perfume lingering in the air. But for the first time in years, that quiet doesn't feel empty, it feels like space for whatever comes next.